November existed, and so did I, and so did video games. So let's talk about what I played during it. The first game I got into was Cyberpunk 2077. On my main channel, I worked on a video about cities in video games, and I figured in order to make it feel well-rounded, I would either have to talk about Night City or Baldur's Gate, and as I'm still in Act 1 of Baldur's Gate 3 and far, far away from reaching the city, I went with Cyberpunk. I'm not terribly deep into the game, so none of my thoughts on it are set in stone, but so far I am wildly impressed by it. Night City is immense in a way that I haven't felt before with a game. Its architecture is crushing and beautiful, and the level of detail that can be found everywhere you look feels impossible. I think immersion can take all sorts of forms. It's not necessarily about good graphics or fleshed out worlds, but those things do a lot of heavy lifting here. I don't know, there is just such a believability to the city, and maybe it's just seeing such a detail-rich place like this from a first-person perspective, but from the moment I stepped onto the streets of Night City, I felt as close as I could to being an actual part of the game's world. Visually, it is just so engaging, and there is a weight to every movement and interaction that makes it hard not to be drawn in. I've been trying to become less objective focused when playing games, as I think I sometimes forget to slow down and appreciate the spaces I'm in, and slowing down has been very easy to do in Cyberpunk. Like just walking down the street feels cool, which can't be said for every game. As for the gameplay, I've barely scratched the surface at all. There are still a lot of mechanics to uncover and experiment with, so there's a lot I'll need to experience before having any meaningful thoughts there. One aspect I do enjoy off the bat though is the use of hacking within combat. It not only acts as a nice way to slow down the action to get a lay of the land, but it's fun to mess with enemies in various ways, and it seems like there could be a lot of potential there for cool abilities. Even though I haven't seen most of it, the story is compelling already, and a standout part of it for me is the character Jackie. So many games will pair you with a best friend from the start, and most of them aren't that likable, but Jackie is super endearing, and I really enjoy his dynamic with V. The game pulls this friendship off well, and I'm excited to see how they exploit it in order to hurt me. So yeah, I am still super early in the game, so my thoughts on it definitely will change as I get further along, but at the moment it is super promising, and I'm excited to play more. Honestly, I am very thankful to be playing this version instead of the one people got at launch. I didn't follow it that closely when it first came out, but so much of what has pulled me into the game seemed to be utterly bugged back then. I get why a lot of people might still feel resentful about it, but it does seem to be in a really good place now. It kind of makes me wonder if more AAA games would benefit from some sort of early access structure. I know that may seem weird, but frankly, it pretty much is what happened here, except it just wasn't communicated. I don't know everything that went into Cyberpunk's release, but clearly the scope of the game outpaced the deadline. Personally, to avoid this, I think more studios should just focus on smaller games, but for those that do have aspirations of making massive things like this, the current model is not sustainable. They need to do something. Even though CD Projekt Red should be commended for bringing their game so far, it was decisions by their leadership that made it so they even had to in the first place. So yeah, I'm very impressed with what the game is able to accomplish, but I really hope CD Projekt Red has learned from this and that it is reflected in whatever they put out next. Anyway, I'll keep you posted on my thoughts as I get further into the game. Then I played Mind Over Magnets, a puzzle game made by Mark Brown of Game Maker's Toolkit, and it was a really pleasant time. I do want to say off the bat that I'm biased when it comes to this game because I've known Mark for a good while now. I can't really remember the first time we met, but I do remember the first time I ever saw one of his videos. Way back in the day when I was getting my start, my Minimaps Are Stupid video became the top post of all time on r/game design, which I was super proud of, but then Mark put out banger video after banger video, each of which got posted there and absolutely shattered my record, and I couldn't even be mad about it because his work was just so good. Sometime not too long after then, we got connected, and he has always shown me a lot of kindness. He is someone I look up to as a person and a creator, and he makes this space so much better. This game, as well as the accompanying series developing, is one of the coolest multi-platform projects I've seen someone do. I've thoroughly enjoyed watching the process of the game going from just an idea to an actual playable title, and learning alongside Mark about the trials and tribulations of game design that most of us on the outside never see or consider has been illuminating. The point of me saying all of this is that it is hard for me to look at it as just a standalone game instead of as a process. Due to my proximity, the mere existence of it feels feels like a triumph. I'm super proud of him for doing this. Now, with all that preamble out of the way, I do have some thoughts on the game itself. Just like what you would hope to get out of any puzzle game you play, it has a bunch of thoughtful puzzles with clever solutions that make you feel smart for solving them. The pacing is solid, you're always learning some new mechanic or way to utilize a mechanic, and ideas generally build off of each other in logical yet intriguing ways. With that said, it is pretty easy though. And that's fine. Puzzle games don't need to always be complete brainbusters, but I did find myself wishing that more of the levels had been a bit harder. This is certainly an oversimplification of the design, but one tactic this game uses a lot, and that Mark even talks about in the developer commentary, is misdirecting the player toward a wrong solution to get them to learn the lesson they need to find the right one. And this is a powerful tool, but the thing is, a lot of the times, the moment you fall into the wrong solution, it immediately becomes clear what you need to do. Not every puzzle is like this, but with the ones that are, it sometimes feels less like you are solving something and more like you're being led through it. This sort of thing is okay for tutorial puzzles, but as it extends beyond those, it adds to the feeling that things are a bit too easy. More often than not, you don't have to think all that deeply to arrive at a solution, and yeah, I enjoy when games require more internal processing. The last world is where the game gets the most complicated, but it's also the shortest section, which is a bummer as that was when the mechanics were at their most interesting. I wish there had been more levels with that kind of depth, but I also understand that Mark wanted to put something out and not just iterate on it for all time. Ultimately, it is a very competent puzzle game that will give you a handful of nice aha moments, but never really gets into the challenging range. If looked at completely separate from Mark, I think it holds up as a nice little puzzle game to play with the family. But when you add the context of the developing series, it turns into something I think everyone interested in game design, which frankly I assume is all of you as you watch me, should look into. There's a lot to learn there for both designers and players, and it's just really fascinating. I finished off the month with Thank Goodness You're Here, and holy fuck is this the wildest game ever. You play as a weird little guy who is sent to a weird little town, and you pretty much go around helping people in one way or another. And like, help might not be the perfect word for it, as you largely interact with people and objects by slapping them, but by and large, your actions do allow the citizens of the town to accomplish what they are aiming to accomplish. The gameplay isn't really the star here though, the general spectacle is. It is wonderfully animated, and the art style is both charming and gross. It often feels like you're playing a cartoon, and not just any cartoon, but the most fever dreamish cartoon you can imagine. The game goes off the rails regularly, but somehow still is able to ground itself within this quaint little Yorkshire town. The dialogue is performed exceptionally well. There is a casualness to it that makes it feel like it's not just a performance, and pretty much every line is delivered with perfect comedic timing. And honestly, the game's timing in general is one of its strongest aspects. There are so many bits, both with the dialogue and the action, that are made far better because of the devs' grasp over when to rush a beat and when to hold one. And man, I don't know, I was just laughing the whole time. There are also a handful of bits that you are fully in control of, so you get to determine their timing, and the comedic tension that comes from that makes things even better. What's maybe most amazing about the game is that as someone who knows nothing about the culture of Yorkshire towns, I'm certain that tons of jokes flew right over my head, yet I still think it's probably the funniest game I've ever played. It works on so many levels, and I can only imagine how fun it must be for those from there. It's great. I guess if you really don't like absurdist humor, it might not be for you, but in general, I'd highly recommend it for anyone looking for a funny evening. Anyway, that's it. I'll see you next time, unless I decide to stop doing this. I caught up. It'd be so funny to quit now.